Hello everybody and welcome back to Screen Stars. I'm here today to review the 2015 horror documentary movie The Nightmare, a documentary that focuses primarily on the phenomenon known as sleep paralysis. Now, over the last 12 months or so, I reviewed a number of movies, horror movies that are focused on sleep paralysis. Things like Dead Awake and things like that, and it seems to be cropping up more and more in horror movies. And even A Nightmare on Elm Street has elements of sleep paralysis embedded into the movie. So it's, when put into a horror movie and put in right, it can be a pretty scary movie if it's done properly. And I've also mentioned previously in my videos that I actually know someone who has told me they suffer with sleep paralysis, and when they've explained it to me, it does sound absolutely terrifying. So I was really interested in watching this documentary, and this focuses on 8 individuals, and they all get to tell their story and their experiences primarily with sleep paralysis. And what is good about this documentary, and the really good thing about this documentary is, while they're explaining it, they give you a visual representation of what they're talking about. So they reenact what they're saying, and at times it's genuinely frightening stuff that they're showing to you. Now, whether you want to accept the scientific explanation or the explanation that some of the people in this documentary give is completely up to you. I mean, from my perspective, these are the people that are suffering with it. They can believe what they want as far as I'm concerned. You know, they're the ones that have to put up with it. For me, the main weakness of this documentary is the fact that I don't think it's necessarily a particularly balanced approach. Most documentaries will give you the argument from kind of both sides. Well, this is mainly just from the perspective of the people suffering from it. You don't get scientists or doctors giving you the scientific or the textbook explanation of to what it is and what they're suffering from. So you get an unbalanced view of it, but I think that's the point really, because they're trying to make a documentary and a horror movie at the same time to a certain degree. So I think they want you just to focus on the horror aspects of what they're talking about, and that they do really well. But if you wanted to watch a documentary that gives a more balanced approach, you're not really going to find that here. Even though they do, the people when they're talking, they give explanations as to what they've been told it is by professionals and their own research and that kind of thing. But you also get their perspective of what they actually think it is, or what they, over the years, have put together what they think it is. And some of it is a little bit face palmy or unbelievable, or makes your eyes roll a little bit, because there are a couple of people, and the way they talk about it, it's I'm not convinced that they actually suffer from it, or they think it's something more spiritual, or they think they're being visited by dead relatives at times. And it didn't feel like some of the stories some of the people in the documentary were giving felt very much like the traditional sleep paralysis stuff you hear of. You know, like the man with the hat and the shadow figures and the pressing on the chest and a cat on the chest and the old hag and things like that. All the traditional things that you hear in regards to sleep paralysis. The majority of the ones that are talking, it's kind of that kind of stuff. But there's a couple, the stuff they're explaining, it doesn't seem to fit in with what the traditional explanation or of what people experience when they're suffering sleep paralysis. It doesn't seem to fit, so I wasn't convinced by a couple of them. But however, there's still the visual representation they give of what they're talking about is bloody terrifying. And like I say, that is the strongest part of this documentary, is the fact that they give you this reimagining of what they're talking in like a movie format. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, when you watch Crime Watch in the UK and they're trying to reenact the crime, they get actors in to perform it all. This is what they do here, basically. And it's it's done really well. It's not the Conjuring type quality, but it's done pretty effectively, and there are a few moments in this documentary where literally, and I've said this before in horror movies that I've reviewed, if I start going cold and the hair start standing up on the back of my neck sort of thing, I know the movie's doing its job in regards to frightening me, and this does this a number of times when you're watching it. And it does it because of what they're showing you, but also when you actually remember that what they're saying is they experienced this, they went through it, so it actually happened. From their perspective, it actually happened. And that's even more frightening, the fact that any of us could potentially suffer from sleep paralysis. And I'll tell you something, I do not and would not want to go through what the majority of these guys are talking about in this documentary. It sounds bone-chilling, absolutely terrifying, and I don't know how they cope. I genuinely don't know how they cope. So yeah, The Nightmare, a documentary I didn't know anything about. I'm trying to think how I heard about it now. I think I must have read an article or something about it online while I was researching something else. Something like that. But I'm really, really glad I watched it, because I do enjoy a good documentary if they're done right. And this is a really good documentary. It's not a documentary in the traditional sense, I don't think, because like I say, it's they focus more on the horror elements, and it's just from the perspective of the people telling the stories. It's not balanced. So it doesn't feel like a full-on traditional documentary, I don't think, but I still enjoyed it, and I still found it effective and scary, and it did everything it set out to do, I think, this documentary. So I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. Definitely watchable. I had fun with it. If you like a good documentary and you like horror movies, I think there's an awful lot here for you to enjoy and have a few scares at. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Please like the video, share the video, and please subscribe if you aren't already a subscriber. It really does help the channel. Thank you very much for watching, everybody.